But in March of 2021, the Coastal Commission kind of intercepted the whole process, and they took action to direct state parks to phase out OHV use at Oceano Dunes over the next 3 years. And then on an even tighter time frame, they wanted certain other things done at the park, including closure of the Pier Avenue entrance to the park, which they would have done within 1 year. So EcoLogic had been, much like Cal 4 Wheel, we've been monitoring the controversy at Oceano Dunes for a decade and a half, maybe longer. And we submitted comments. We spoke at the hearing and objected. But in the end, that's what the Coastal Commission did. And so we filed a lawsuit against the Coastal Commission. And the lawsuit basically has two pieces to it. The first piece is under CEQA, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. And that's the law in California that generally requires agencies to conduct environmental review, prepare environmental impact reports before they take any action that have an impact on the environment. Well, the Coastal Commission didn't do any kind of environmental review when they decided to order state parks to close Oceano. And for that reason, no environmental impact report was done. And in our view, CEQA had been violated. So that's our first claim. The second part of the lawsuit is under the Coastal Act itself. And that has a number of different pieces to it, but the basic theory there is that Oceano Dunes, as a state vehicle recreation area, was actually first established in 1974. It had a different name. I think it was called the Pismo Beach State Vehicle Recreation Area at that time. But that park has been dedicated to OHV use prior to the enactment of the Coastal Act. The Coastal Act wasn't enacted until 1976, didn't become effective until 1977. And so, our basic theory is if the state of California establishes an off-highway vehicle park prior to the existence of the Coastal Act or the Coastal Commission cannot retroactively exert jurisdiction over it and basically close it. If they were able to do that, every state beach in the state of California would be vulnerable to action by the Coastal Commission. If they decide that they don't want camping at Carlsbad State Beach, which is the state beach right outside my backyard here, they could just decide to close it, even though that beach has been a designated state park beach since, I think, 1912. So at the same time that we filed our lawsuit, we started talking to the Friends of Oceano Dunes. That's the group that Jim Sudi and his compadres formed some years ago. And they've obviously, this is their real focus is Oceano Dunes. We spoke with their lawyer, and we all decided that the more firepower we could throw at this, the better. And so they too filed a lawsuit, actually not one, but 3 lawsuits alleging different causes of action against the Coastal Commission. So together, we kind of blanketed the Coastal Commission with as many legal claims as we could come up with, to be real honest with you. So that all happened last spring. And the Coastal Commission and state parks are defendants in the lawsuit, as is the County of San Luis Obispo, because they have some land use jurisdiction over the park area as well. So over the last few months, the big thing has been trying to get state parks and the Coastal Commission to produce documents, because those documents then form what's known as the administrative record. And the administrative record in these kinds of cases That's the universe of evidence that we can use and that the court will consider as the litigation proceeds. We don't really get to depose witnesses or things like that. It's all based on documents. But the Coastal Commission was kind of slow to produce the documents we needed. State Parks was even slower. And only in the last few weeks have we gotten all the documents together, and we're about ready to certify the record so that we can then start the briefing part of the lawsuits. But some other things have occurred in the interim. One of them is it turns out that state parks and the Coastal Commission, initially we thought that the state parks was going to take either a neutral position or maybe even side with us in terms of, opposing what the Coastal Commission had done. They seem to have sort of slid backwards and slid more towards the Coastal Commission, which has been disappointing. And we learned that they were kind of working together, their various staffs, to actually implement the Coastal Commission decisions sooner than even that decision called for. So we basically went to court and brought this to the court's attention and said, Your Honor, if we can't work out some kind of freeze or stay on what the Coastal Commission is doing, we're going to have to come back to you and with a temporary restraining order and a request for an injunction so that the status quo at the park stays in place while this litigation moves forward. Well, a couple of issues there made it a little tricky. One is that the Friends of Oceano Dunes, because of how they're situated in their membership, they don't really represent businesses, and the group that was most immediately affected by what the Coastal Commission and state parks were doing are the businesses along Pier Avenue. But because Orba is part of EcoLogic, we were able to convince the court that, look, we represent those people. And if they're forced to start closing their businesses right now, while this litigation is pending, only to find out later that the Coastal Commission was wrong and shouldn't have intervened and tried to shut down the park, those people would have upset their entire lives, their entire businesses for nothing. And the court seemed very sympathetic to that perspective and encouraged the parties to go and talk about a stay on the most immediate aspects of the Coastal Commission decision. That took place around, I want to say 17th or 18th of December. The Coastal Commission came back and did agree to a stay on many of the aspects of their decision, the ones that were most immediate in terms of their implementation plan, so that the litigation could move forward without there being any major changes at the park. Now, there was a bit of a dust up over the Christmas holiday because State Parks was supposed to continue accepting reservations and allowing people to spend time at the park over the Christmas holiday. But they ended up closing the park because, according to them, due to the storms, the water in the creek there that gets crossed, it got higher than 12 inches, and under their rules, once the creek gets to that depth, they shut it down. So they started canceling reservations. It was kind of a mess. But anyway, that kind of got past that. But in terms of where the lawsuit is now headed, as I said, the administrative record is nearly complete. Once that's done, we start the briefing process. And the way that generally works is the plaintiffs, that's us and Friends of Oceano Dunes, we go first, we file our brief, then the state agencies, Coastal Commission, state parks, they file their opposition. and then we file a reply. That briefing process takes uh, usually about 6 to 7 months to complete. And then the court usually wants a month and a half to review everything, and then we schedule the hearing. So I think right now we're looking at a hearing sometime in September. And that's just at the trial court. If, my sense of it is that regardless of which way the trial court rules, that the losing party is likely to appeal, which then kind of takes another year to get through. I did want to talk about one other thing, which is I know some people probably saw the news story about a separate lawsuit that the Friends of Oceano Dunes filed. Um, and it's what they call a quiet title action. And the theory that Friends was advancing in that case is that because people have been going to Pismo Beach or Oceano Dunes and using their OHVs and camping on the beach since the early 1900s, that there was basically a public right of way or a public access that was created as a property right, and that the Coastal Commission and state parks didn't have any ability to basically undermine and cancel out that property right. It's a pretty novel legal theory. I don't know if it ultimately will prove successful, but they did overcome one initial hurdle in the last week, which is that I believe both state parks and the Coastal Commission tried to get that case tossed out at a very early stage, basically saying there's no legal merit to even the basic allegations. The court said, I'm not going to dismiss the case right now. I want to hear more. And so they kind of, the Friends of Oceano Dunes on that particular lawsuit, they kind of survived that first early off ramp where sometimes courts will just cancel out a case. So they did manage to survive that. That's probably what everyone was seeing in the news. But just keep in mind, the actual decision on the merits of that lawsuit won't be known for again until the fall of this year. So we're still kind of at the beginning of this, and the real heavy lifting is going to start pretty much now, because this is when you start going through the thousands of pages of record evidence and you build your brief, and that's when the lawyer work starts to really ramp up, and along with that the cost. And so it's not that it's been cheap up to this point. It hasn't been cheap. I think EcoLogic has probably spent close to $75,000 already. But to see this through, probably looking at another $170,000 to go all the way to trial. And so that's the commitment that EcoLogic has made, and I know that they very much appreciate the help from Cal4 to defray some of those costs. But that's where it stands. I know that's a lot of information to take in at one time, but I'm happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Dave, that was excellent background and so on. So anyone in either on Zoom or in this, because we have people in the room here with us as well as on Zoom, have any questions they'd like to forward here? Wow, Dave, you quieted them.
This never happens.
One of the,
you guys turn the gas on in there? Is everyone asleep?
Apparently. One of the things that I've often heard is that we need more updates, not necessarily to the length of this, but something that we can put in our bi-monthly newsletter that says this is what's happening with EcoLogic and these lawsuits, whether it's no progress at all, or we're still doing administrative record review, or whatever it is that can at least tie that bridge over. And I don't know how best we could have that assembled for our not only our website but our newsletter. And obviously we're not asking for the ins and outs of the minutia of a legal action, but certainly some updates on timing and so on. So I'm just wondering how we might best assess that information.
I think that's pretty easy to do, and I tend to have calls with EcoLogic. Especially when we're involved in piece of litigation, we have calls every 3 or 4 weeks, and we handle updates, kind of during that process. But because I have to be careful about sort of attorney client privilege and attorney work product privilege, it's better if I actually write something down where I can make sure I edit it properly. So what I was thinking I would do is try to put out kind of a little mini report that's been sanitized of any confidential information, but still provides enough information that will assist people in tracking what's going on. Try to put out something like that once a month. Litigation tends to be a little bit like any other kind of combat. There's a lot of downtime, and then there's this flurry of activity, and then a lot of downtime again. And so I think if I were to send out these little bulletins once a month, that should be often enough to keep everyone up to speed.
Russ, you had your hand up.
Yes. So I understand the quiet title issue and the jurisdiction or authority of the Coastal Commission. The thing that precipitated a lot of this action had to do with the air quality issues. Is there any cause for action that we're thinking of or possibly might have that has to do with the air quality management district or any of the air quality issues?
Yeah, the air quality issue is a tricky one because, technically speaking, the Coastal Commission doesn't really have jurisdiction over air quality. That's the San Luis Obispo County Air Pollution Control District. But they've kind of started working together in the last few years and using the Coastal Commission as a leverage point. In this particular litigation, you're right that among the various reasons that the Coastal Commission staff gave in recommending that the OHV use be phased out at Oceano was the air pollution issue. And just so everyone knows, that the air pollution issue in question is PM10 particulate matter and PM 2.5. It's basically the small particulates that are normally associated with dust. So where that plays a role here is the Coastal Commission is going to attempt to justify their decision to shut down Oceano on grounds that it's a public health hazard, among other reasons. We're all familiar with, it's an ESHA in an environmentally sensitive habitat area, and that OHV use damages the environment. We're very familiar with those claims, but they've in recent years added this sort of human health aspect based on the dust. And so they're going to try to justify or use that issue as a justification for shutting down the OHV use. And our position is that the data do not support that at all. On the contrary, the most recent studies, including some really great work out of the Scripps Institute tied to UCSD, shows that the dust, the PM10 and the PM 2.5 that they're all concerned about, once you break that down and you really see what its constituents are, it's not mineral, it's mostly water, because of it gets very windy, it blows water droplets off the ocean. That becomes PM10, PM 2.5, and gets captured at the monitoring station. Everyone thinks that the boost in the PM10 numbers is because of OHV use. Turns out that's not the case. So we'll probably get into some of those technical issues as we proceed into the brief writing phase of the litigation.
So as a background
Okay,
here,
thank
Dave,
you.
as a background here, Dave, the next speaker is a past president of our association and whose father is in the Off-Road Hall of Fame for having created the idea of dune flags, and had the safety issue at Oceano. Before it was Oceano, before there was a state park, he was running up and down the beach, meeting users and explaining the elements of safety to them. So this is Don Spuler with a question.
Can you hear me?
I can.
There was discussion a while back about when we created the Oceano Dunes State Recreation Area back in the early 70s, that it was created by an act of the legislature. And because it was created by an act of the legislature, state parks doesn't have the right to actually close it down. Is that a story, or is that something that's actually being considered in the discussions?
That's a great question, and it's kind of a complicated answer. So let me give you at least my take on that argument. The Pismo Dunes State Vehicle Recreation Area, which is what it was called back in 1974 when it was first established, was established by state parks. I'm not aware of any legislative action that that actually brought it into being. It was, an administrative action on the part of state parks. Where the legislature got involved, however, is in 1982. That's when the OHMVR legislation was first enacted. And as part of that legislation, it was to promote the development of these state vehicle recreation areas. And in the actual act, the legislature identified the existing state vehicle recreation areas, in effect, legislatively endorsing their existence. Among those was Oceano Dunes. And that's where the legislative piece comes in. And, our position, much like you articulated it, is that once the legislature puts its stamp on the existence and continued life of a particular state vehicle recreation area, neither the Coastal Commission nor even state parks can willy-nilly get rid of it. They need literally an act of Congress, or in this case, state legislature, to get rid of Oceano Dunes as a state vehicle recreation area. And so that's how we're trying to position this in terms of the legislation that was passed in 1982.
Just a little background history for many of you who don't understand or weren't around to see all of this. The Oceano or Pismo State Beach was originally accessible to motorized all the way from the north fence of Vandenberg Air Force Base all the way into the city of Pismo Beach. And at that point, you could drive the whole 17 miles of the beach, part of which was owned by Union Oil, part of which was owned by Santa Maria County. Some of it was a mining claim for the Santa Maria Sand Company. But the area that is now the state vehicle recreation area was controlled by Pacific Gas and Electric, and they wanted to place a nuclear power plant at that location. And William Penn Mott, who was then the head of state parks, on a 4th of July weekend, flew along in a helicopter and saw the 100,000 people who were camped all the way from the Santa Maria River north, and said, oh my goodness, we need to do a better job of managing this. And there are other places that no longer want OHV, like Sand City and Morro Bay, and we're going to concentrate this into one location. And I am going to trade a part of a potential state park that PG&E can build its nuclear power plant on, and we are going to establish a state vehicle recreation area here to provide the kinds of access that these people want to have. And thus was created the park, and the trade-off was for Diablo Canyon which has become Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant, which you can actually see if you're camping at the dunes over on the spit that runs out west of the dune area. So it was created for a reason. It was created as a trade-off, and it was promised to the people of California as a place to have motorized access to the coast while it was being removed from other locations and concentrated and managed in this area. That's the background history. Mr. Cave, our Vice President of the Central District, whose people are those who flood to the coast for relief regularly all summer long.
Good morning, Mr. Hubbard. How are you?
I'm fine, Mark. How are you?
Just fine. Thank you for your help and for coming on and speaking to us. I'm also the president of the foundation, the Cal4 Foundation, and we are a nonprofit arm. And thank you for the communications of where now we can support you through the foundation's fundraising efforts. So my question to you would be, would you be available or amenable to either appearing at some sort of fundraising event that we might put on potentially here, time to be arranged at your convenience? Just press the flesh, say howdy, and see if we could get some people to write us some checks.
I would be more than happy to do that. I'm not sure how much of a draw I'm going to be, but
more than me.
But you guys set it up and tell me where you want me to be and when, and I'll arrange my schedule to be there.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Point of history, when we were doing the litigation at Glamis, one of the things that ASA did was info meetings where we would assemble a group of board members and we would get Mr. Hubbard to show up to explain how that lawsuit was going on as it progressed for more years than my kids and grandkids have been alive. But he is a tremendous draw. There's no doubt. People want that information. They want to understand what's going on, and they want to support something that's going to be successful. So we can put that together and get Mr. Hubbard there. He will be a draw.
And I know that Kerry is on the line here, and I just want him to know that usually, and this is no different, when I've come to make these kinds of presentations at gatherings, especially if there's a fundraising aspect, Kerry, don't worry, I'm not going to bill you for it. So
I was taking notes, wondering about the answer to that question.
So we're good.
A consummate bean counter and always asking that question. We getting charged for this? So we have any other questions? Do I see any other hands on Zoom? Everybody happy and satisfied, learn what they needed to learn? I cannot express how important this was for both of us organizations to be able to do this. I really appreciate both Dave and Kerry being here this morning. I can't tell you how much ASA appreciates what is going on here and the support that EcoLogic has provided and their desire to make a positive effect at Oceano. And the last comment I'd like to get from David is the idea that we have to, moving forward, continue to work with management as we did at the dunes. We were suing the BLM. We were partners with the BLM in lawsuits over ISDRA, but yet we were always reaching out to make a better experience, a better manageable place for OHV. And that is, I believe, one of the elements that's missing here in this fight. The fact that we need to have a friend, because if we win, State Parks is going to be the one that ends up managing this. Somehow we need to influence State Parks to have a better view of our recreation and their ability to do it in a positive way.
I agree 100% with that position, and also keep in mind that throughout the litigation, the court, as all courts do, will put pressure on the parties to sit down and try to negotiate a settlement. And there are, I think, some settlement concepts that might address the concerns, not all of them, of the Coastal Commission and state parks and of the user stakeholders. I think there are some compromises that could be made if people get creative. And because of that, the need to maintain and actually improve our relationship with state parks is going to be critical. Nothing would make me happier than either we win at trial, win an appeal, or if we come up with a settlement, whatever the vehicle ends up being. But if we can keep Oceano Dunes open and have it on a pathway where the level of interference that we get from the Coastal Commission is minimized, and everyone sees a way forward so that this can continue in perpetuity as the unique place that it is, that would be a fantastic outcome. But it will definitely require a lot more, in my view, a lot more interaction and creative thinking with the managers of the park, and that's the state parks people.
Responsibility is on us as visitors. That's not a legal thing. That's not something that Dave is going to be able to go out and say, hey, we need to sit down and do this. It needs to be something we have started. ASA has started, EcoLogic has started somewhere, but this is not the kinds of things I'm talking about support wise, and changing the agenda at state parks is a lobbying effort on our part, not a legal effort on EcoLogic's part.
And the last thing that I'll say before I close and let you guys get on with the rest of your meeting is, if as a group you have questions that come up from your membership. I know that every group has, its social media presence, and there's a lot of information, some of it accurate, some of it not so accurate, that gets knocked around and can create some stress in terms of what's really going on. If something comes up that you guys need an answer to, don't be shy. Let Carrie know, or let Mark Cave know that I'm very happy to try to give you a quick response to those kinds of things, just so that any misconceptions don't sort of stay in the I don't want any misperceptions to remain in the public sphere so long that they start to become fact and where people start to believe them, because that gets to be a very difficult thing to unwind. And so to the extent that problems or issues come up that you have questions about, the sooner you can let me know and the sooner I can respond, I think we'll be in a better place.
What else have their hand up? Oh, Mark, there we go.
Just one last thing, and very much to the point, your point. Obviously, there's other stakeholders, interested parties, other lawsuits. Could you speak to just how do we kind of make sure that we continue to have friendly relations with everybody? Too many cooks spoil the broth, I think, but at the same time, we all have a stake in this. We want to make sure that we're all working together to the same goal. And how do we approach the other stakeholders, or what should our position be relative to the other parties involved?
And that's always a tricky one, because there's also a healthy bit of competition, let's say, among various OHV groups in California. But each one has kind of its own personality and own set of agenda items that they want to pursue, and sometimes there's a little bit of conflict there. But in this particular instance, we don't really have the luxury of beating up on our fellow groups. This is kind of an existential crisis for Oceano Dunes, and whatever differences I or EcoLogic or Cal4 may have with Friends of Oceano Dunes, our shared interests eclipse those 100 times over. And I'm very happy that we're working together with them. And so I think, at least for this case, our best approach is we're in this together and we're going to support each other 100%. We're not going to, get involved in sort of petty sniping about, who's doing more or who's the more important group and that kind of thing. We're kind of past all that. So I just think that going forward, our best approach should be this is an OHV as a collective issue. It affects everybody, not just one group or another group. And the more that we can kind of stay together and push in the same direction, there's a greater likelihood that we'll succeed.
Well, Dave and Carrie, go back to your lawn mowing on Saturday, and we'll conduct the rest of our meeting. And we cannot tell you enough how much we appreciate your being here this morning.
No problem. I appreciate the opportunity. And, if sometime in the future you guys want to do another one of these just to make sure everyone's still up to speed, just let me know.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
All
folks.
right.
It's been a pleasure. Absolute
Bye,
pleasure.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.